Hey folks, welcome to another video where we're going to take a look at creating an NFT dashboard powered by SubQuery. So the aim of this lesson is to build an example project to index NFTs bought on the Paris marketplace. And in particular, we want to grab the buyer and the price of this particular NFT, the classy kangaroo. Now, the actual end goal that we want to achieve is to be able to write a query on the left-hand side here that you can see and retrieve the same data from our indexing project on the Explorer. You can see we've got the token ID of 193, which matches what we see on the Explorer. The same with the NFT contract ID of classy kangaroo version 2.near. We've got the same here. And then with the FT token ID and the price as well. So there are just 4 steps involved in creating our project. The first one is to run the subql init command. And this creates a scaffold so you don't have to start from scratch. You get a project pre-populated with files and folders and sample code for you to modify. Speaking of modification, the first file to change is the schema.graphql file. This file defines the shape or the type of information you want to extract. Next, we need to modify the manifest file, also known as the project.yaml file. And this is essentially a configuration file where you define filters, the start block, etc. The last step in the process is to modify the mapping handler file, and this is where the actual coding and the transformation of the indexing data takes place. Here is a link to the completed code for reference as well. So with this in mind, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I want to do is initialize our project, and I can do this with the subql init command. It asks me for my project name. Let's call it Paris NFT, and then I'll choose my network. I'll select near again, and then choose the near starter project. I'll then go ahead and accept all the defaults. And as you can see in the top corner, I've got all the files and folders required to start my project really quickly. The first thing I want to do is go into the project directory, and I want to run yarn install just to download all the dependencies first of all. Now this is completed, my next step is to try to get this project running first of all, just to confirm that there are no issues. So to do this, I run yarn code gen to generate the TypeScript source files, and then I can build the project, and then I can start Docker using the command start :docker, which effectively just does a Docker compose pull and a Docker compose up. This will pull down all the images. I've got my container here in the background. It's going to create 3 images, a database, a node, and a GraphQL engine. Once this is running, I want to go to localhost port 3000 to run the playground. You can see in the background here, it's starting to index blocks. I've got my playground up and running now, and let's go ahead and run a very simple example transaction, which you can see from the GitHub repo here. This is the near subql starter repo, and down below here's a very simple example query that I can copy and paste here and hit run, and automatically you can see that I've got some data coming back, so everything is running well. So from here, let's go ahead and stop the indexer. I'll also go ahead and delete the database. This is important because we're going to make some changes. And next up, I will go and open up the schema.graphql file. So this is the starting place. And you might be thinking, well, what do I do first? So to understand what data we want to extract, let's first of all go to the website, the marketplace here, paris.id, and we'll scroll down to a particular NFT here, maybe this one here, classy kangaroo, and we'll check out the details. And what I'm going to do is look at the history, and I can see down here this particular record is a purchase or a bought record for 43 NEAR tokens. Let's open up the Explorer. And what you'll notice is that the information that you see on screen, we can index if we want to. What I'm going to do is jump into the execution plan, the actual action area, and I want to extract these parameters here, the token ID, NFT contract, FT token, and the price as well. So to do this, I'm going to add these fields to my schema file. I also usually always add the block height just to make it easier for troubleshooting. And there we have it. We've got our schema file created. The next step is to open the manifest file or the project.yaml file. And it's here where you can see the chain ID, which is mainnet of NEAR. We can see the RPC endpoint running a dictionary. So we're going to modify the actual handler itself. So this is what we're going to filter on. And at the moment, you can see it's filtering on the Sweatcoin token. So let's go ahead and change the method name to buy. And also the receiver, we want to modify here to this value here, marketplace.paris.near. And the reason why it's buy is you can see here the call method is equal to buy. That's in the handle action. In the handle transaction, let's remove the sender. We don't need this. And again, the receiver will copy this from below like so. The last thing I'll do is I'm going to change the actual block height, because in this example, I want to grab the data fairly quickly. So let's go to this particular block height here. And there we have it. The third and final piece of the puzzle is to jump into the source code, the mapping handler. And let's go ahead and modify this. We're not going to use the block handler, so I can delete this. And then inside my handle transaction, what I want to do is grab the block height. So again, I'll just save some time. So I'll copy in the actual code instead of typing it out. And down below, I'll also put this here, but I'll modify this to be action.transaction. I'll also need to modify the handle action with all the parameters that I wanted to extract. So again, let me just remove the amount and add in the token ID, NFT contract ID, FT token ID, and the price as well. And because this is a function call, by default, this is a transfer. So we want to change this to function call. Now let's go ahead and run yarn code gen to get the TypeScripts of our schema fixed, which will remove some of these errors. And then if I go ahead and build the code, I should get an error. I've got an issue with my formatting here. So let's delete this, save it, and rebuild it. There we go. Let's now go ahead and run this by going yarn start docker. And I'll also open up my playground, and you can see the project indexing. Now I'm going to paste a query in and run this. And this query basically filters the results for a particular block, just to give you an example of the information that we're pulling out. So again, if we go into our example here of classy kangaroo, you'll notice that the ID is 190 and we're pulling out 193. And that's because in this particular example, I'm just giving a demo for a different kangaroo. In fact, it's ID 193 here. And if we do a comparison, you'll see that this one in the history field was bought by Donkey 2020 for 45 near tokens. So you'll see here Donkey 2020 sent 45 tokens to the marketplace in exchange for this particular NFT. So all the code that we use today can be found in GitHub. There's a link to it, which you saw earlier in the presentation. All you have to do is clone this particular project, and then you'll see the example query provided here where you can copy this in and then grab the same information out. So there you have it. Just a quick summary where to create a project like this. We ran SubQuery init. We then modified the schema.graphql file, keeping the existing entities, but we added some extra fields that you saw. We then modified the start block and also the method name as well, where we had the buy method and the receiver was marketplace.paris.near. We then modified the two mapping handlers, the handle transaction and the handle action, deleting the handle block. So there you have it, a very simple example of how you can index NFTs on the Paris marketplace.